Great. Hi, Amy, Jackie, Jennifer. I am Katy Bueller. I am a licensed midwife. I have a home birth practice here in San Diego, and I've been a midwife for about 8 years. And I asked you guys to come, as you know, today to share your experiences of prenatal, birth, and postpartum care with local community midwives, also birth and birth center midwives, home and birth center midwives. And as many people who are watching this know, the rate of home birth or birth center birth that's out of hospital in this country is around 2%, maybe 3% since COVID. And I think we're gonna maybe have babies on this call too. And,
there's one right here.
and I believe that number should be much higher based on the kind of care experiences I've heard people sharing about their time with midwives. I'd love to know how your prenatal care was, how your births were, how they felt to you, and your postpartum care. So I just think that when more people hear about this, they will start to understand the value of it, and that it's for all people, not just for a particular subset or the hippies or whatever. It's really, really an opportunity for all families. And so if we could start, maybe Jackie, if you just want to introduce yourself.
Hi, so my name is Jackie and I live in San Marcos currently. I guess the thing I identify most right now with is that I'm a writer and a mom of 2 kids, a 4-year-old and a 9-month-old. And after becoming a mom for the first time, I stepped away from my job as a paralegal and I jumped into creating a space for moms to share their own stories through writing called Motherscope. And I've hosted events, I've created magazines in and around it, workshops and writing groups that just support women sharing their stories to diversify the motherhood experience. It's not just, doesn't look the same for anybody. And so that's my big passion. And I think a lot of that really is credited to my experience with midwifery and centering the mother. So
Wow.
I'll talk more about that later, but
Wow.
I very much am a part of this kind of mission inspired by what the care that I received with my midwife.
That is amazing. I love all of that. And I can't wait to go look up Motherscope. That is so cool.
Thank you.
Dang. I didn't know we had like that kind of powerhouses on this call. Okay, who wants to follow that?
I'll go next. So, sorry, my 2 little ones are home. My name's Amy, and I have 3 kids. I have a 17-year-old daughter. I have a almost 2-year-old son and a almost 3-month-old daughter. My 17-year-old was born in the hospital, and she had a very medical birth. She was turned, I was induced, I had an episiotomy, and my other 2 were born at home. I also actually had a surrogate baby 11 years ago. She was born at the hospital, but she was my first natural delivery. I'm a nurse. I worked in postpartum for a long time, so I thought that you had babies with OB, and that's how all babies were born. When I moved to San Diego, I started working at Best Start Birth Center, and that's when I really was around water birth and midwives. And so when I had my surrogate baby and my youngest 2, that really put me on the path of having a more natural midwife, home birth, and yeah, so that's kind of how I fell into home birth and finding all my midwives.
Cool. I can't wait to hear more. I can't wait to hear you guys' stories. Okay. And Jen, how about you?
I'm an attorney and I have 2 daughters. One is almost 4, she's gonna be 4 in a couple weeks. And then the other one is 6 weeks old. And I'm hoping she sleeps through this Zoom call. She's napping in the room over there. But my first one was born in a hospital birth, and things went relatively well. I don't have any major complaints, but I did want a unmedicated birth with minimal interventions, which I essentially got in the hospital. But because things turned out as I did, I felt like, well, I'd like to do that again, but in a more supportive environment that's more conducive to my goals. I got pretty much everything I wanted in the hospital setting, but there was a lot of like, hey, are you sure you don't want an epidural? Like, every hour. Yes, I'm sure, for the fifth time, I'm positive. And while my OB, I love my OB, she was on board with my birth plan and the minimal intervention thing. But the reality is, once you get to the hospital, you're not with your OB most of the time. You're with nurses you've never met, who may have never even worked with your doctor, and then chances are it won't even be your OB delivering you. So that's sort of what got me looking into home birth. And I think COVID gave me a little bit of a push, just because my fear bigger than getting COVID was having to birth alone without a support person. And I heard stories that New York, I don't know if it was New York City or state, wasn't allowing support people into the hospital with women, and women were having to give birth alone. And I feel like California and New York often work in lockstep in terms of policy. So I sort of was like, okay, this could be coming to California, and that is the last thing I want to deal with when I am, delivering a child. So that's sort of when I started researching it, and I sort of, it was sort of an off the wall idea to me initially, but the more I looked into it, I figured it never hurts to get more information. And I was pretty much sold after talking to a few midwives and reading a little bit about it.
Okay. Oh my gosh, I'm so excited that I got you three on this Zoom. There's so many cool stories already. Can we just have a quick go around? Can you just say the name of the practice that you had your experiences with?
I'll start. You had Paula as my midwife for both my pregnancies and births.
Okay, great. And you never had a hospital birth?
No,
Okay.
I have two children. Yeah.
Okay, great. And Amy?
My first daughter was born up in LA with the OB at a hospital. My surrogate baby was born down here at Kaiser, and she was actually delivered by a midwife. And my two little ones were born at home with San Diego County Midwives.
San Diego County Midwives. Okay, great. And Jen?
I had Paula Tipton-Healy and her team as well.
Oh, okay, Jen and Jackie both have the same team. Awesome. Thank you. Okay, so just to make it easier for people who might be new to this realm of home birth and birth center birth and midwifery care, I kind of wanted to start off with like prenatal care. I think prenatal care is hugely expanded when you have community midwives compared to the obstetric model. I mean, I actually place very little blame on OBs for that. I think it's a systemic problem. Personally, I think that the problem is those appointments are required to be 15, 10, 5 minutes. And so OBs just don't have the time to, and nurse practitioners, anybody in a large scale system doesn't have the time to spend as home birth midwives or birth center midwives might be able to. So can you start, can each of you share about what was special maybe about your prenatal care, or how long were the appointments? Anything that you think really stands out for you about your prenatal care?
I can share. So I didn't particularly have a problem with how short my OB visits were. I sort of liked the efficiency, and I never felt rushed. I felt like she always gave me the time to ask any questions, and she always gave very thoughtful answers. So I like that. So I wasn't, necessarily seeking midwifery care for long, extended prenatal visits. But what I found to be a great benefit was getting to know the team, because I think trust is such an issue. It's a big thing. And going back to the the medical model, you don't even know who, most of the time. There's some doctors who still deliver their own patients consistently, but most of the time you don't know who's going to be delivering you and what nurses are going to be there with you during your whatever 15 hours of labor. You meet them for the first time when you walk into the hospital. So I love developing that comfort level with Paula and her team and getting to know them. And it's basically like setting up this prelude of a very warm and supportive environment, which is really, I think, key to a successful home birth. So that's the part I really liked about the prenatal care.
Wait, Jen, why do you think that that makes a difference in whether you stay home and have a baby or not?
So, I mean, I don't know, like I personally felt pretty anxious about giving birth both times, less so the second time because you've done it before. But, you know, having an unmedicated birth, I know some moms are going to be like, oh my gosh, it was magical. It was peaceful and serene. It wasn't for me. It was super painful both times, much faster the second time. But you know, it was it's all in the head. You know, you have to sort of practice to get into that right mindset. You need to have the right support. My husband is amazing. But part of it is I feel like when you're in the hospital and you're walking into a strange place you've never been, except for maybe that 20-minute hospital tour, you're being cared for by people you've never met, who don't really know what your goals are. You haven't had multiple discussions with them about how you want your birth to go. You know, they look at your little checkbox list of birth plan things, but do they really pay attention to it? I mean, they get a gazillion of those a day and they're just cranking through patients. And again, like you mentioned, it's really a systemic problem. I don't blame the nurses. And, you know, I didn't have a negative experience. It wasn't like anybody was unfriendly or unhelpful or unsupportive. But when you develop a relationship where you get to know the person and you're seeing the same face over and over, and you build that relationship, I think it's just very comforting and adds to the support factor when you are having a home, well, any birth really, but in my case, a home birth.
That's such an interesting perspective. So what I hear you saying is that for you personally, like the anxiety level was lessened because you already knew who they were. Is that true?
Yes, and like building the confidence, right? You know, obviously I had confidence in their abilities to be midwives, or else I wouldn't have signed into the practice to begin with.
Yeah.
But, you know, just over time, you develop a relationship and they answer all your questions, and you know that you just really feel you're in good hands. And, you know, the reality is I felt like I still feel like I'm in very good hands with my OB, but wasn't there to deliver my first baby, and she wasn't necessarily going to be there for the second, you know, so.
Yeah, it's a systemic issue, right? Not a personal issue. You can like your OB, you can feel comfortable and safe with them. And most practices are set up so that they're set up on a rotation, a call system. And so it's not clear that your OB, the one that you've made a connection with, will be there at your birth.
Right.
And we could even, as you all probably know, and I'll just say for the listeners who don't know this, we know that pregnant people, especially at the end of their pregnancy, they have just a huge ability to connect, like connection and warmth, and almost what we would call like a mothering gets so strong with the hormones at the end of pregnancy. So I imagine from what you're saying, Jen, that it really helps to have established connections. And I think that those established connections then help like you said, your body to relax, your mind to relax. You already know you trust the people in the room and that they're going to be respectful. So.
Exactly.
Yeah. How about Jackie and Amy? What would you say about prenatal care?
Yeah, I mean, I would echo so many of the things that Jen just said. I think for me, trust, like establishing the trust, like was mentioned earlier, and just like, I mean, for me, it was such a night and day experience to go from I didn't have a full pregnancy and birth with an OB experience to compare it to, but I started out with my first pregnancy with at Scripps Coastal through there. And I went through them because they have the the nurse midwives that assist with the deliveries. And I just remember doing my first couple prenatals there and just feeling like something about it didn't like sit right with me. Like it just felt very very like just clinical, I don't know, and something really big was happening to me, and there was so much that I felt like I wanted to be a part of, and it just felt very much like I was getting things done to me, and then I was being sent on my way. And I had already had some exposure to what home birth was and some of the advocacy and activism around birth and hospitals and the treatment of women, so that was always like on my mind. And I think I just had some insecurity about my capacity to do something so, in my mind, extreme as to go through the home birth route. And what kind of pushed me to just try it was I had this conversation with my husband, and we were just like, well, I can always change my mind and go to a hospital at the last minute if it doesn't sit right with me, but doing the opposite and changing my mind and going with the midwife might not be as easy as of a decision later down the line. And I'm so glad I did that, because really, I feel like the prenatal care that I received with midwives was what I value almost even more than the birth experience, because like Jen, you talked about, like that trust and the connection and the relationships that were built with my midwives during my prenatal care made me feel more confident in my abilities, made me feel like I was not afraid going into it in the same way that I know I would have been otherwise. And I think mentally, so much of birth and so much of, our healing and our physical health and everything there is a mental component to that I don't want to say is neglected, but I think it just isn't as prioritized, likely probably due to just the limited time and all these things, but in the standard care that most women receive. And so with my midwives, just being able to talk to them and ask questions and feeling comfortable to do that in that space with them was huge. And I just remember once, I mentioned Paula being my midwife, but Haley was also part of the team when I was with both my pregnancies. And I remember at one point, like my blood pressure was high at one visit, and I remember getting like, not saying anything, but Haley kind of looked at me and was like, I can tell by like your expression that you're really worried, and like I just want, and she really, like, because she knew me enough, like she was able to sense that and talk me through it. And like I remember like breaking down in tears, and like I would have never done that in a doctor's office, but like being able to kind of work through that in that moment, I was able to walk away from that appointment and not be freaking out. Whereas I know that with other doctor's appointments for other things in the past, I've gone in, been told something and acted like I was fine and walked out and had no way to really like process it. And when you're pregnant, like that's such a huge thing to be able to not hold all that in. So that was just like worth its weight in gold for me, the care and the prenatal experience for me.
The things that stood out from what you just said, Jackie, was, and this is my personal favorite, when as a midwife, what I'm really trying to do all the time, and what I heard you say that's so valuable, is it helped you build your own confidence. And I think when we hold space for other women or other people, and like she looked at you, she recognized what was happening, she didn't brush it off, she wasn't like, you're fine. She was like, I see that this is hard for you. I see this is causing you stress. Don't worry, we're okay. And then you had whatever emotions you had, and she held that. And I just think that is so there's two things. There's the building the confidence, and then there's also the space to like really be ourselves, which I think then processes into like believing that we're allowed to be ourselves in the rest of our life as well. Yeah. It's awesome. And it's really nice. I really appreciate that you called out Haley in particular. All of us midwives in San Diego, we all know each other. And so it's just nice to like put the experience with the face, and God, she's just such a love. Yeah. Amy, I'd love to hear from you.
Sorry, we're having a toddler meltdown over here. So give me 1 second. I'm gonna mute myself and get him settled, and I'll be right back.
Jen, this is a great opportunity for me to ask you or Jackie, if did either one of you hear things in what the other one said that was that you wanted to respond to? Because I don't have to be the only one that leads this conversation.
Yeah, I loved what Jackie said about building confidence because, as I mentioned before, I had the anxiety going to both births, you know, the pain and the whole like, it's so mental for me, you know, being able to power through it and be in the right mind state. I feel like with both births, my mind was just constantly frazzled. I needed a support person or support team to sort of guide me through that. When, I mean, all I can remember about my births is just I couldn't control my thoughts. Like my whole thought process was totally just scrambled. And, you know, despite doing all the mindful birth practices and the hypnobirthing, my mind was not calm when I was having those terrible contractions. So I feel like Paula's team gave me that a confidence level that, you know, I can do this. I can do this at home. And it was like their confidence gave me confidence. And knowing that they'd done it thousands of times, it was Paula, Ariana, and Anissa. Knowing that they knew what they were doing made me feel like, okay, I'm in good hands with them and my husband behind my back. I got this.
And just to say that the brain scramble, you know, if you're a lawyer, I imagine that you really like to have the orderly mind, and the brain, yeah, and the brain scramble of labor is totally real. And so that would be a little disorienting. And so it's helpful to have people to orient and to be like, we're okay. It's okay that you're scrambled. We can still birth.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, like what you said earlier, Jen, about you were saying that, you know, there are people that will talk about the serene and peaceful birth experience and that wasn't yours. I mean, I can say so many positive things. There are things that like weren't ideal in the whole experience that like naturally happen that we can't plan for, but like in just the same way that they got to know us really intimately, the time that I was able to spend with them, like I was able to get to know them. And so like you said, like when I'm you know, having contractions or laboring and I'm feeling a certain way and I see and I can tell that they are like not like they don't seem stressed, they seem very relaxed, like that put me at ease to be like, okay, like everything's fine, you know. And so being able to just like feed off their energy and vice versa just throughout the experience, but especially during the birthing time, was like also just such a blessing that like I don't think you would get necessarily in like a traditional setting.
Totally agree.
Okay, Amy, are you ready?
Yes, thank you. Sorry about that. So I really feel the same way that Jen and Jackie do, that I did see my OB concurrently with both of my home birth pregnancies, just because I had the ability to, and it paid for my like lab work and stuff like that. But the visits were very short, which to me, like Jen said, was fine. All of my information got across that I needed to. But when I would see my midwives, my appointments were 45 minutes to an hour, and it's just really building that rapport so that I had total confidence in them when they came. I remember when I had my daughter, I looked at them and I said, I'm scared. And Andrea looked at me and put her hand on my hand and said, you don't have to be scared. Your body's doing what it's doing. And, you know, you've got this. And it was just so like, you're right. I don't have to be scared. I have these women here who have done this, who are walking by me, who are helping me with my husband there and my older daughter, and I can do this. And I think also the visits between my son and my daughter were different because of COVID, and even with the midwives. And I really liked the fact that they did a lot more spinning babies with us this time, which was really helpful. It gave my husband a hands-on, better way to be involved in the pregnancy because he'd go with me, and then we could come home and do the things that the midwives had taught us. So I think he felt more connected this pregnancy as well.
It's really nice to have a baby on the call too. Hello, baby.
This is Marigold. She's almost 3 months.
She's gorgeous.
Adorable.
Thank you.
So adorable. Thanks for bringing a baby, Jackie. Jackie, where's yours? Jen?
She's
6
with
weeks?
Dada. Maybe she'll make appearance later.
Maybe we'll get to see them. Sorry, Jen, were you going to chime in?
Oh no, I just said Marigold is adorable.
Oh yeah, she's
Yeah,
gorgeous.
it's so precious.
It's so funny. I want to just say out loud that it's really interesting because I'm asking about the prenatal care, and you can't help but tie the birth into the prenatal care. And that is it. Like, I feel like the other thing that's unique about midwifery care, community midwifery care, is it's truly integrated. So it's we're not just looking at your vitals, your blood pressure. We're looking at how's your nutrition, how's your relationship with your partner, how would you like to incorporate your older kids? Like, okay, your hips are hurting. What should we do about that? Oh, you're having headaches. Oh, you're having Charlie horses. Oh, you're having nausea. Like, we're going to try to work on all the things that make a difference. And then hopefully all those things parlay into the birth. And so let me ask you, like, more specifically, like, were there things in your I'm going to be really ask you to get really specific. Were there any things in your prenatal care that, like I just mentioned, all the complaints and things that you specifically remember your midwife team solving with you? Like, oh, I had hip pain and they helped me figure it out. Or my first baby was posterior and they helped me not have a posterior baby the second time.
That did happen with me. I had a lot more pelvic and back pain. I was also going to acupuncture and massage, which they recommended. And then just doing the spinning babies in the office was really helpful because then I could come home and my husband could do that. And so it really did help. I'd have pain, and after a visit with them, and then after a couple nights with my husband doing stuff, it went away and I was much more comfortable.
Yeah, that's great, Amy. That's exactly what I was asking. Thank you for sharing. Jen or Jackie?
I had an interesting second pregnancy. Everything was going fine until 28 weeks. And in retrospect, I think some of these issues had to do with my father being ill and then dying 2 weeks later. But something started before that. So I was diagnosed with Iugr. And so that sent me down a path of horrors and all kinds of extra testing. I was super nervous, did all this Google research, which I shouldn't have. And then that turned out to be not an issue because we revisited my due date with my OB, and she was like, well, your menstrual cycle is pretty irregular. So, your due date's really 5 days later. This baby's totally fine. No growth restriction issue. A week after that, had a little bit of elevated blood pressure and then protein in the urine, and I was basically seen at the hospital a couple of times for preeclampsia, given steroid shots. Idea of home birth was basically out the door at that point. And then strangely, they had me come back for a second urine test, the 24-hour one, and they were like, oh, just kidding. There's like no trace of protein in your urine whatsoever. You don't have preeclampsia. So then it was, well, maybe it's just gestational hypertension. And then, a couple weeks, 3 weeks later, that totally resolved as well. And honestly, I think a lot of this was stress related. And I'm not faulting the way my doctors managed it or anything like that. They got the numbers they got. But what I really appreciated was how Paula and her team handled it. I think they were just a lot more calm about it, right? When you go to the doctor, you're seeing a bunch of different specialists, a bunch of different people doing ultrasounds, and you're getting limited pieces of information, and nobody sort of has this overall view of what's going on. But I feel like Paula and her team were just, let's take it one step at a time. I think you're probably fine. We're not obviously going to override what doctors are saying in terms of ultrasounds and lab results. but because I was ready to just totally abandon the idea of home birth. And Paula kept encouraging me to keep checking in. Let's keep your visits on the calendar. Let's see where this takes you. She said, we got to go with the information that we have, but I just have a gut feeling that everything's okay. Just in my experience with having delivered thousands of babies and having thousands of patients, something's like the picture's not quite right with you. Something is off. And sure enough, a month later, it just turned out I was totally fine. Nothing was off. And I was really, really glad that I did not abandon the idea of a home birth. And I was super, super appreciative of their just sort of calm approach and one step at a time and keep all options open. So, I mean, I'm really glad. Best decision ever.
That's a great tale. I don't usually get to hear those kinds of tales from the mom's perspective. I get to hear them usually from the midwife's perspective. And I think also, Jen, what I'm hearing you say that I want to express for people listening who may not understand what midwives do, what you're saying is also that they caught what was potentially a life-threatening issue. They caught it. They said, okay, let's do the tests. Let's continue the tests. And they kept calm while doing all that, but they created the protection for you on a clinical level, while also creating the protection for you on that like emotional, integrated level. Like you said, like you still had the overall view, like who cares about Jen? And then you could still feel that the care was still there.
Right. And I want to clarify that most of the clinicals, because I did co-care as well. So a lot of the testing was done by my doctor's office, and I was reporting back to Paula and her team because I really wanted, a second, it was beneficial to me to have a second opinion and see what their thoughts were. But I feel like they really helped my mind state throughout the whole process. And even if the home birth thing didn't work out, having that support, the emotional support from them would have been very valuable in and of itself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Oh
yeah, please go ahead, Jackie.
Oh, I was just going to chime in because I had a similar experience as Jen in some ways that kind of made me want to clarify something about midwifery care. Because I think for people that aren't familiar with it, there might be this like presumption that midwifery means like less care, like more hands off, like you're kind of just like, you go and you get less I don't want to say intervention, but just less like monitoring or something. And for me, I felt like with my first birth, so everything was tracking throughout my pregnancy as like fine. I was weight gaining and measuring and everything on track. And we'll probably get into birth later, but my son was born earlier than expected, still like after the 37 weeks, but and also a low birth weight. And so there was a lot of talk after the fact of like, was it Iugr? Like what caused this? There was never like a final answer on that. But with my second pregnancy, knowing how my first went, having Paula and her team, I just felt like there was this extra added attention to the matter, like to make sure we did all the things so that just in case everything was taken care of. I had extra ultrasound. She recommended me go see an OB just in case I went into labor early. So I was familiar with like an OB ahead of time. Like those were things that she advised and obviously were my choice, but like were things that she recommended that I think sometimes there might be this perception of midwives where they're like, don't do these things, don't go see an OB. And it was very much like, these are your options. Like, what do you think you're willing to do? And this is what we recommend. And I always felt like I was given all the options and handled with the best care, no matter what tracked on like my pregnancy.
So great. Thank you for the detail. Amy, you had a different midwife team than Jen and Jackie. Would you concur with their, do you feel like your midwife team was also as connected both clinically and I would say emotionally or big picture?
I do. They were supportive of me seeing my OB at the same time. I had my own reasons for doing that. I've had multiple losses, so I just felt comfortable. The OB that I currently see was with me during my last loss. So in case I needed to go to the hospital, even though I wasn't guaranteed that she'd be the one to deliver my kids, I just needed that reassurance of being there, and they were very supportive of that. And and actually my OB, I hear a lot of them aren't supportive of home birth, but mine was. She knew from right off the bat that this is what I wanted to do. She supported me. She said, it's great that you're still coming in here just in case, whatever makes you feel comfortable. And so they, even though they didn't work together by speaking together, I was the liaison between the two. Everything that my OB said, my midwives backed up, and everything that my midwife said, my OBs backed up. So it was great that mine worked out well too, to be able to work together to have a happy, healthy baby for me.
Who is your OB?
I see Dr. Hartzell at Kaiser.
Well, gosh, I got to get in touch with Dr. Hartzell. They sound really great.
She is really great. She's actually out right now, but she is fabulous. And I found her by accident, I guess. She kind of fell into my lap, but she has been wonderful and supportive, and I was really happy with the care that I got from her.
I'm so happy to hear that. It's so uncommon, unfortunately. Again, I think it's systemic, that we get that home birth families get that kind of support to continue with their home birth plans. And I want to say that I want to make a plug here. You know, in the big picture, Kaiser is actually the best at doing that. There's a couple of OBs in town besides Dr. Hartzell who will support your plans to have a home birth, but they still have to kind of do it under the table because of their insurance issues. But Kaiser in general is like, oh, you're planning a home birth? Okay, got it. Yeah, let us know if you need anything, we'll support you. So I want to make a plug, because I think if we say that that's the standard, then I think we can start to move into that direction.
The one thing I do wish Kaiser would do, since they seem supportive of home birth, is let us home birth. You know, I had to pay out of pocket for both of mine, which was fine, but I know that's not an option for everybody. But I feel like I saved Kaiser so much money by not having a baby in their system, but they won't reimburse me. They won't help me. So that's a real shame. I wish that they could get on board just that little bit more to help us and allow us to have to pay for some of it at least.
So I would love to make a plug here. One of the intentions of C Midwives, the organization that I formed, is to change how insurances support families to have home and birth center births. And so if anyone listening to this, you, Amy, or anyone else wants to form a team with a home birth midwife to create a plan to go talk to Kaiser and see if we can get contracts, I really think that is a possibility. I think that we could save Kaiser a lot of money. I think that Kaiser is the one health system that might be open to it right now. And because we do cost a lot less with actually better outcomes. So in case you, Amy, or anyone else is listening, it can't be me. I'm completely full with my projects right now, but there are other home birth midwives in San Diego who could nurture that project, I think, and we could see if we could make it happen here. Because Kaiser birth, I had a client who called to find out what the birth itself would cost, and she was told $23,000, unmedicated, all natural, less than 1 day stay. So as you all know, home birth, I charge $6,500. Other midwives charge more or less than that, but it's around that ballpark. And so that's less than a third of what Kaiser says it costs for just the birth. Plug, unashamed. So we have 13 minutes left on this call, and I feel like there's still so much to talk about. And I think there's a lot of information out in the world about birth with midwives. Can you all talk about, can we skip birth for a moment? We can maybe come back and have another conversation, but Can we talk about postpartum?
I think postpartum care with midwives is far superior to managed healthcare. I got one visit, both times. Doctor just said,
with managed
"How you
healthcare.
feeling?" Yes, sorry. How you feeling? How's everything going? You're clear to have sex. Call me if you have any problems. But with midwives, I had 10 visits. They came to the house 24 hours after the babies were here. 48 hours, I was having another visit. I think it was weekly after that. And there was always a way for me to reach out, where with my OB, it was a long phone call, an email that didn't always get answered right away. With my son, I had problems breastfeeding, and my midwives were here with a lactation consultant helping me breastfeed and diagnosing his tongue ties and getting that fixed. But to have one visit is crazy to me when you had so many when you were pregnant, and then you just get one 20-minute visit. That's it. And okay, I'm glad everything's good. So the midwives are just far superior in that sense of really helping you. And it wasn't even my first baby, but just holding your hand every step of the way afterwards and just making sure that everything is going well.
I would love
100%. Oh, no, you go, Jen.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
Oh, I 100% agree. Not like, again, I don't have something to compare it to, but I just know what I've heard from other people. And for me, it was like, I couldn't even tell you how many postpartum appointments or visits I have with them, because I just felt like there were so many. The 24-hour thing is huge, to have somebody come in to your home, like you don't have to leave, and they come to you and check in, and just that peace of mind alone was like huge. And I had a very kind of normal, quote unquote, second postpartum experience, but my first was like, my son was low birth weight, so Paula literally like got on the phone with the pediatrician and demanded to talk to her, like on the phone, to go through stats and make sure the baby was okay. They had donor breast milk delivered to the home. Like that day, they had a lactation specialist come to the house to do a house call when she normally didn't, because they wanted me to make sure that I had everything I needed to avoid any complications. Like they were just on it. I didn't even have to think about it. I didn't see any of that going on after having my baby. It was like I was able to just focus on me and my baby, and they took over. And like that was something that I was aware of after the fact, was like not like that all the things that they did, but that just speaks to the integrative kind of care that they provide when things come up. And when things go smoothly, there's still like so much more attention in those first few days, weeks, and months that follow that just aren't there when you go the medical route.
Yeah, and I would like to build on both of you. And one of my concerns when I was first researching home birth and before I signed up for it was, well, you know, they do all kinds of testing on the baby in the hospital, and they take vitals and all that. Well, who's going to do that if I have a home birth? And what I came to learn is that midwives are really specialists in all of it. I mean, they know a lot about breastfeeding, they know all about babies, they know all about labor and delivery, and so they're like a one-stop shop. And so when they come to your house, they're checking you out, checking baby out. And yes, that is the most comfortable thing in the world, where you don't have to leave your house. They come to your house a couple of times. And you don't have to go to a separate pediatrician visit and a separate OB visit and leave your house a bunch of times when you should be recovering and at home resting and taking it easy. And I had a great experience with Paula and her team. My daughter did end up having a little bit of jaundice, which they identified. So we did end up going to a pediatrician for that to get some extra follow-up testing to see if the levels, the Billy levels are going down. But Paula and her team also had Billy lights available if we needed them, and they even dropped it off at my house. So I mean, the experience was amazing.
You guys almost have more to share about the postpartum than you did about the other stuff. Like, that's so compelling. I'm more convinced than ever. Honestly, I'm not even exaggerating. I think it's so good to hear it from your perspectives, and to think, and for me with the postpartum, it's such a tender time. It's still so tender. And there's so many things, like Jackie called them complications. Like, there's still so many places where a new family, like so many places where a new family can experience complication. And sometimes that complication is breastfeeding. Sometimes the complication is birth weight or gaining weight. Sometimes it's like, our baby's so fussy and why aren't they pooping? And for first-time parents, I experience as a midwife that there are so darn many questions. Like, I'm usually there for 2 hours, the first day and the third day, just to make sure that they get enough time to ask all their questions. And we don't rush through it. We don't, it's not like, okay, I need you to breastfeed so I can make sure your latch is good. Okay, check. Let's weigh the baby. Okay, check. Like, it's like you have to, in order for the system that is inherently there for moms and babies, right? The inherent system of, this is a time where you have to slow down. As a new mom, you have to slow down. The baby requires it, and babies go slower. And so we have to create space for whatever has to happen in that visit to happen at the pace that it can go, where mom and baby can both be nurtured. And so not only do we do the technical things that you talked about, but I think just showing up and having someone that, like you said, sort of that continuity, like the presence of someone who you know cares about you, coming back, and you trust them and they're answering questions. And it's yummy too, isn't it? Did you guys think those visits were kind of yummy?
It was
I
like seeing
always
your
was.
best friend after a little while, you know, like you went through this huge thing 24 hours prior, and then they come in and it's like, oh my gosh, we finally did this thing. It's like your best friend's there.
Yeah, the bond is just so rich. And like, I just remember always looking forward to visiting them. And, you know, I've continued care. I wanted to say earlier, and I know we're out of time, but like being able to see midwife, I like learning about that midwives are not just for birth, like that, you know, you can go to midwives for your well women checks, and like the continued care that I've sustained with them. Like, I've never in my history did I look forward to those kind of appointments before, but just to be able to go in and chat with them, it's like they're you know, women that I love. And so like, where do you get that? Like, where do you get that other in another setting? It's just amazing.
Yeah, I feel the same way about my clients. I feel like I love them. And it's funny because a lot of times people will say at the 6-week visit, like, wait, am I not going to see you again? Wait, is this really it? Like, you're breaking up. And like, but Amy, it does feel like I become friends with my clients. I feel like I'm one of the family. And I get excited when I get a 1-year birthday party invitation, you know, or Jackie, if they call me for a pap, I'm just like, phew, so happy to get to see them again. And it's like real relationship. Like, it's an actual human relationship. Like for me, it's like, I wish I was like still living in the old village, the idyllic village in my mind that probably never actually existed, but like, where like all y'all would be my neighbors and I would help you with deliver your babies, but then I would get to see your babies grow up. And we would it would be a symbiotic relationship, and not like a systemic pay by the visit, clinical, like, it just feels like birth is meant to be more about those relationships. You're supposed to be developing those relationships with yourselves, with your husbands or partners, with your babies, with your family, with your midwives, with the community. Like, it's a process of becoming, I think, and I think I think that inherently it's supposed to be that way. And we're just in a time period where structurally that's not how it goes for a lot of people. But it's so exciting to hear that you feel the same way that I do.
It sounds really cliche to say that it takes a village, but it really does. And your midwives become part of your village. They
Yeah.
feel like your family.
Yeah.
And since we talked about postpartum, I did want to also plug Ariana. I don't know if you did this, Jen, but she has a postpartum package that she also offers called an MI ritual. That she wasn't part of Paula's team my first birth, but for the second, I did it with my daughter after I had my daughter. And being in a pandemic, being so disconnected from people, having somebody come in and do this very like nurturing, package care. I felt like this spa, but also just very much like helping me process what I had gone through was just so helpful and so wonderful. It's like a bath and a wrap and a massage and soup and all of that in one. And that was a really neat way to like close that experience for me too.
I didn't actually do that, but I'll also plug Ariana because she's amazing.
How long did the whole process take, Jackie?
I think she was there for a couple hours. It was like a week and a half or so after I had given birth. And yeah, so like an hour and a half to 2 hours, I think.
And did you feel any like question mark? Should you pay for that, or is that okay for a mom to create for herself? Was there any of that for you?
No, but only because it's something that I have learned and developed after my first birth. I think if it was my first birth, I would have been like, I don't know that I need that. But after learning about how important postpartum, like how much we kind of reverse focus on like the prenatal and the birth versus like the after, that really like hit me hard with my first birth. So once I learned about things like a postpartum doula, like that existed and how important that was, and just kind of how keeping the mental focus on the mother is so important. As soon as she told me that was what she offered, I was like, oh yeah. And any second time mom that I've talked to about it is like, yeah, that sounds amazing. Yeah. So I think it takes maybe like one or two kids to really like realize how needed that is. But once she mentioned it to me this time around, I was like, oh yeah, that sounds like so wonderful. So yeah, and it was.
I think so if you're a first time mom and you're listening to this, just notice that Jackie said second time moms understand. Because it really is the first time you just, like you said, you focus so much on the birth and the prenatal, and then our culture, the American culture, does not, like you said, it's not centered around how do we support the mother in the postpartum. That's just not the way of thinking in general in this country, I would argue. And so what Jackie's describing is this incredible experience that you deserve, to be nurtured and to be like held and to be massaged and to be acknowledged for the giant work you just did and will continue to do. I think that, yeah, like I'm so happy. I didn't know Ariana offered that service, and I will definitely be telling my clients about that as well. That's beautiful. We are at 12 o'clock and I could definitely keep going. I'm loving this conversation and also respectful of time. And I have somebody with their water broken. I got to go. So I just wonder if Jennifer, Jackie, or Amy, any of you have anything you're like, I still really want to make sure I say this. Is there anything still out there for you guys? No, not necessarily. Okay. I hope that you enjoyed this as much as I did. Thank you very much again for coming on this call. And I just really admire the words that you used and getting to center, like you said. One of you wrote in your thing like that what was special about midwifery care was centering mothers. And I feel like in this conversation, I'm proud that I felt like I was able to center your voices. And I feel like I got a lot from that. So thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. If you guys, I'll private message you. And if you want to come back and we'll talk about birth, I would also be happy to host a conversation where we talk just about birth. So
yeah, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Yes, thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thanks so much for your time. And I'll see you all again soon.
My pleasure. See you
Bye.
soon.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.